to call on the gentleman from South Carolina for his 5 minutes of questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Price, are the Online Safety Act and the Digital Services Act extraterritorial in scope?
They, in effect, are, yes.
But they were not designed that way originally, right?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there's enough ambiguity that that was the intention, in my view. It's not precise.
At our last hearing, Mr. Farage, that you were here, Mr. Farage discussed the emergence of a two-tiered system of justice and how censorship efforts in the EU and the UK disproportionately target conservatives and individuals critical of their governments, particularly on issues like migration. Under the DSA, would a statement like, "We need to take our country back," be considered illegal hate speech?
All right, folks, buckle up, because what you just watched from Forbes Breaking News should alarm every single American who still believes in free speech, national sovereignty, and the idea that governments are supposed to fear the people, not the other way around. Let me say this clearly right out of the gate. This isn't about hate speech. This is about power. What Congressman Fry exposed in that exchange wasn't some obscure European legal debate. It was a flashing red warning sign for where the global ruling class wants to take all of us, including right here in the United States. When a lawyer openly admits that the EU's Digital Services Act and online safety laws effectively apply beyond Europe, that should make your blood run cold. Because once laws cross borders, democracy dies. These laws weren't sold as global censorship tools. But that's exactly what they've become. And let's be honest, they weren't created to stop violence or protect children. They were created to silence political opposition. "We need to take our country back" is now hate speech? Let that sink in. A phrase that has been used in peaceful political movements for decades, a phrase rooted in self-government, is now being cited by EU bureaucrats as an example of illegal speech. That's not extremism. That's patriotism. But to unelected elites in Brussels, it's dangerous because it reminds people who's actually supposed to be in charge. The migration crisis isn't imaginary. The lawyer didn't dodge the question. Europe is facing a massive migrant crisis. Governments open the floodgates. Communities are under strain. Public services are overwhelmed. Crime is rising in many areas. And instead of fixing the problem, European leaders are doing what authoritarian regimes always do. They criminalize criticism. Spain legalizes over 500,000 migrants and then immediately announces a crackdown on hate speech. That is not a coincidence. That is narrative control.
Common denominator, and in effect, I don't mean to be attacking Germany all the time. It's Germany. The Germans, and I mean the UK has its own system outside of the DSA, but the level of crackdown on speech in Germany is unprecedented. 60 Minutes did a very good documentary highlighting that issue, and because of the German obsession with controlling speech that has been now expanded across the European Union and is now being globalized, unfortunately, through the DSA, we're seeing everything set to that standard.
So in effect, this is a subjective determination by some faceless, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrat that is making the determination on what hate speech is or deceptive content is or is not. Do you trust EU bureaucrats to define hate speech when they label "we need to take our country back" as such?
No, I don't. And as I say, most of the raft of digital regulation that we've seen came in on foot of the so-called rise of the right, the Brexit vote. And that's very tightly connected. It's caused by that. It's correlated with it. And the reason being that they felt they had lost narrative control. And Graham's correct. The legacy media in Europe is heavily funded by the state in many accounts. Whereas with X, people can post their opinions, they can get millions of views for them.
Right, it's a free exchange of ideas, right?
Free exchange of ideas.
The modern public square. Under the DSA, companies are required to monitor and censor such language, and violations obviously would result in fines or maybe even FBI raids or federal raids in Paris on X, right? That's the next
yes, sir, that's what
punitive step?
Yeah, and lawyers are often careful about making predictions, but I confidently predict that the next round of fines on X will be connected with illegal content and this content moderation for systemic risk. They identify so-called anti-migration narratives or others as a systemic risk to the discourse inside the European Union, and they have to stop it. And it's not just Europeans, and this is where this becomes global. if you're in Texas or South Carolina or New York and you're commenting on what's going on in Europe, saying, the migration situation is a disaster, they don't want that speech to leak across into Europe. So either X will start to globally moderate it by removing it, or we're going to see a firewall being set up in the center of the Atlantic, and that would be a disaster even further for free speech. It creates exactly what Vice President Vance described as this civilizational divide.
Well, it's alarming to me. I just visited the DMZ a couple months ago, and the divide between the West and South Korea, if you will, and then North Korea. This seems like, and the suppression, the lengths that the North Koreans go to make sure that things don't come into the country, this sounds exactly like where Europe is headed, and hopefully they can course correct and that we never follow them on this path. Thank you, Madam Chair. And with that, I yield. Mr. Chair.
Europe's approach versus America's tradition. Here's the part that should make Americans furious. In this country, our tradition has always been debate in the open, argue freely, let bad ideas die in sunlight. Europe's approach? Silence, suppress, arrest. And now through the DSA, they're trying to export that model worldwide. That means what someone posts in Texas, South Carolina, or New York could be censored because it might offend regulators in Germany. That is insanity. Who decides what hate speech is? This is the most dangerous part of all. Under the DSA, the answer is national regulators, local law enforcement, unelected bureaucrats. No jury, no clear definitions, no accountability. Just faceless officials deciding what opinions are allowed, often based on the most extreme, speech-hostile countries in Europe. And Germany keeps coming up for a reason. Even 60 Minutes, not exactly a conservative outlet, documented how aggressive Germany has become in policing online speech. That model is now being imposed across the EU and beyond. This isn't about safety, it's about losing control. The lawyer nailed it when he tied this crackdown to Brexit and the rise of populist movements. The political class lost narrative control. Legacy media, heavily funded by governments, no longer controls the conversation. Platforms like X allow regular people to speak, organize, and reach millions. That terrifies elites. So instead of winning arguments, they rewrite the rules. Global censorship is the end game. Here's where this gets truly dystopian. If Europeans don't want Americans criticizing their migration policies, they have two options. Force platforms like X to censor content. Globally build a digital firewall to block ideas at the border. Either option destroys the open internet. And when the lawyer compares this to civilizational divide, even invoking North Korea-style information control, he's not exaggerating. That's the road this leads down. This isn't Europe's problem alone. This is a Western civilization problem. If Americans don't stand firm on free speech, real free speech, not government-approved opinions, then what's happening in Brussels today will be happening in Washington tomorrow. Because once governments get the power to define hate, they will always use it against dissent. Patriots don't need permission to speak. Citizens don't need bureaucrats to think for them. And free societies do not survive censorship. If you agree with this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video so more people hear what the mainstream media won't say. This is the hill worth fighting on. And I, for one, am not backing down.